This presentation is regarding organizational management and some of the important components to consider when establishing your organization. It is a collaborative effort between Karen, Heather, Yesenia, Jacqueline, Valeria, and Sophia. Some of the successful childcare operations include implementation of several components. First, licensing regulations. Then, ethical code of conduct. Considering the center structure, implementing policies and procedures, and establishing a professional development plan. Health and safety in childcare is a crucial piece of running a quality childcare center. It's important to follow health and safety standards laid out by the licensing agency and also give parents the knowledge and tools to know how to identify quality childcare. When following these standards with great integrity, the quality of your program can be highlighted for best practices and effective marketing purposes. There are resources to help parents understand what quality childcare looks like and good questions to ask while pursuing the best option for their child. We took this opportunity as a group to come up with a center structure. So a fictitious business that would be represented in this case with some full day preschool classrooms and a toddler classroom. And our center structure is defined with one center director, an assistant director, 4 lead teachers, 5 co-teachers, and 3 program aides. So each preschool classroom, in this case, has a lead teacher and a co-teacher to assist in the classroom. The 2 program aides will float to ensure classroom teachers get breaks, lunches, and ratios are always met. We know that this is often a challenge. And sometimes some staff will be full-time and some will be part-time. These are all things to consider. The toddler class has a lead teacher and a co-teacher and 1 program aide to maintain ratios. That program aide would not float, but be assigned to that toddler classroom. And an additional program aide and the assistant director will ensure that breaks, lunches, and ratios are always met. Job titles and descriptions. As I said, we have a director, and the director would report to an owner, and the structure of their position. This is taken from the template that we received in this class and basically identifies brief job description, key responsibilities, what's necessary to be a director, what knowledge, what minimum qualifications as far as education is required, what permit would need to be held, and any special requirements that the center requires. We would have an assistant director also. This same template gives us an idea of who they report to, what their brief job descriptions are, key responsibilities. These are not intended to be completely detailed. It's just an idea. It might be something you use to market for one of these positions for the purpose of hiring. But just a brief overview of each of their assignments and who they report to. Teachers, the program aides. You can see that some of these positions are full-time. Actually, I think all of these positions that we posted were identified as full-time. Ideally, you would want to be able to secure staff that you could offer that full-time employment to. Some are exempt, which would identify them as not really being tied to a 40-hour work week. They wouldn't be punching a clock. They would be responsible for many duties during business hours, maybe outside of business hours. But just briefly, you have a moment to overview what it is that we would require of these positions. Now, you would want to consider the system that you have in place when you're onboarding a new staff. Of course, they briefly know what is going to be required of them, maybe from the job posting and what the requirements are, but you would want them to have an employee handbook. You would want to review that handbook with the staff to ensure that they understand all of the requirements, what the expectations are. So reviewing that employee handbook with them would be a very important piece of onboarding a new staff. You, of course, would want to give them a tour of the school and introduce all of their fellow staff. You may want to assign a shadow teacher. So if you have an assistant teacher or a master teacher, even starting at your location, you would want them connected with another staff member that they could go to ask questions, that could work closely with them during that onboarding process so that they understand the ins and outs of your business and what the expectations are. You certainly would want to also regroup with them and discuss the expectations and responsibilities, ask them if they have any questions or concerns. This would all happen within that first day of onboarding. Maybe you have it as a 2 or 3 day process, but really important that you reconnect and discuss all of those expectations and responsibilities. And of course, you always want to cover all the emergency procedures. That would be actually one of the first things you would want them to do before they stand alone in the classroom. Before you put them as a lead responsibility in the classroom, you want to make sure they have a clear understanding of emergency procedures. There are so many resources available to help you develop your program and what policies and procedures might be important to you based on the regulations, your program values, and the components important to you and your community. So these are a couple of resources that are available to develop policies and procedures. First, the Practical Guide to Quality Childcare, great resource. And then another would be a guide to developing policies and procedures in childcare settings. Certainly in some communities, there are going to be things that you would want to identify as more important for you than in maybe other communities. You would want to have some sort of an idea of the makeup of your community. Like for example, if you live in a community that has a high number of military families, maybe there's a real need for you to develop policies and procedures that meet the needs of those military families. So a community assessment of some sort may be part of the role or a piece of the program that you implement to always have an ongoing understanding of what your community needs are. Now, I think that the operational file that we completed during the course of this class really gives us a great skeleton for looking at what we would need in the case that we were creating our own childcare business. You could certainly add components depending on the program that you're offering. Clearly, certain programs have much more extensive operational files that identify perhaps Head Start requirements or details of particular policies that might be unique to them. But the table of contents that we were given as a guide for creating an operational profile or an operational file certainly was a great starting place. So, developing a mission, being really clear about what your mission is, having a professional behavior policy, that's really important to be able to gain staff that can buy into what your mission and your behavior policies are, can really own it and stand by your philosophies. Creating a team building policy, I think, is really important. Establishing a professional development plan. We actually went so far as to create a professional development plan for this purpose because in organizational management, in my opinion, in the opinion of our group, we felt like that plan for our staff was going to be integral to establishing a professional growth for not only each individual staff, but us as a whole. Establishing staff evaluation policies, and all of the other components that were part of that operational file, having that really clear and available for all of your staff members to refer to and understand is a really important piece. The professional development plan that we came up with, and I think is pretty common from center to center, is, identifying a couple of days in the school year that we take the opportunity to maybe close down and identify some really important pieces, maybe do a team building exercise so that we can kind of reconnect. We all know that in this business, we get busy, we are in our own classroom doing our own thing. I think it's important to connect with our team members, with our coworkers. So a team building activity, I think, is really important, a part of a professional development day. Of course, developing a training to expand on already established practices would be really integral to maybe help us elaborate on certain details that we want to highlight as strengths or weaknesses so that we can personally grow and implement those things in our classrooms. Introduce new curriculum ideas. I think that's also an important part of a professional development day. It's an opportunity for growth. It's an opportunity to learn new things, but then also offering some classroom prep time so that you can clear out the cobwebs, so that you can take down old artwork and really have some time to work together as a team, the teacher and the assistant teacher and additional staff that might want to contribute or help out with your classroom design, maybe move furniture around, do the things that you can't necessarily do when there are children there in the space, or that you can't get done during your teacher prep time that's identified. So I think that having one day during an identified downtime for the school, maybe during the fall, maybe it's after you've had an open house, and it's an opportunity to kind of like clean house and regroup. And then again during the summer break time, when it's kind of low enrollment always happens during the summertime, so closing down for a day isn't typically too impactful for the families. So just a couple of professional development days. I think that teachers generally appreciate the thoughtfulness that goes into developing a plan like that. And this resource page wraps up our presentation on organizational management. It gives you an idea of some of the tools that we utilized to access and discuss some of the important parts of establishing an organization, and some educational resources that we felt were important to consider during our professional development plan and the like. So this concludes our presentation.